Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Man in America. I'm your host, Seth Holhouse. As we approach November 3rd, the presidential election, one of the biggest questions that I've had is, what's their playbook? You know, we know what role COVID played in the lockdowns and the changing of voting laws in the 2020 election. But as we approach what I think is an even more important election in determining the fate of this country, you have to ask yourself, what's the plan? The pandemic 2.0 hasn't really caught. All the other things, the riots, they can't really bring out BLM riots again. It's just not working anymore. But one thing I would say we can't ignore is the border. And so my guest today, Carrell, is an ex-border agent, spent 2.5 decades working on the border, running teams on the border. He's a highly, highly intelligent guy who really understands the role of the border. And so he's working on a documentary right now, not just on the border, but what's happening once these illegal immigrants come into this country. And the information that he's come across, whether it's whistleblowers from the DHS or people in inner city Chicago, the picture that he's painting through all of his research and discussion and travels is a frightening picture. It's a picture of hundreds of billions of dollars from our own government going to NGOs, non-governmental agent organizations that are then funneling these immigrants in this highly, highly organized fashion in a way that he's never seen before. And so many of them he's seeing are going into Chicago, into these already war-torn areas. And what he believes, as we'll detail this, is that a war is coming. And that this war, though, will be sparked not between Americans and Americans, but between the most difficult places in this country, the most hardened places with criminals and violence and gangs, between these areas and massive amounts of illegals coming in that are coming straight out of the prisons, specifically in Venezuela, and being placed right into these areas of Chicago, creating, as he describes it, a powder keg. So this is going to be a very more serious but sobering discussion about what's happening in our country and the role of the open border and how I think it will actually affect everyone's way of life come November this year. So folks, please enjoy the interview with Carrell. Hey folks, I've got a quick message for you. So I'm sure you've heard a lot of people, myself included, talking about the importance of buying precious metals, gold and silver. But what's really behind that? Is just a thing of, hey, buy this gold, buy this silver, right? Or is there something deeper that we should be looking at? So I recently came across some figures about house prices. So in 1930, the average family home was approximately $4,000. Fast forward to 2023, the average family home is just over $400,000. So you have to ask yourself, why is that? Is it because things have just gotten more expensive? No, it's actually because the dollar has lost 99% of its value since 1930, right? When people talk about the collapse of the dollar or inflation, this is what it means. Now, let's take a look at gold. So in 1930, if you wanted to purchase your home in gold, it would take approximately 200 gold coins. So 200 gold coins would purchase the average family home in 1930, about $4,000. Now, if you, instead of buying a home with that gold or cash, you set those aside. If you set aside $4,000 in cash in 1930, it would be worth $4,000 today. What can you buy with $4,000? Can you buy a family home? No, you can't even buy a crappy used car. But if you set aside $4,000 worth of gold coins in 1930, which is 200 gold coins, 1-ounce coins, that would be worth approximately $400,000 today. And this is the key lesson about precious metals. It's not about getting rich. It's about putting your money into an asset that protects you against inflation and against the destruction of the currency, which is what happens to all fiat currencies, especially now we're in the end days of the dollar. And so that's why it's important, maybe not all of your money, but a portion of your money, a portion of what you have, I highly recommend putting it into precious metals of gold and silver, because what it's doing is it's protecting you. This is an asset that has stood the test of time, not just stood the test of time since the 1930s. We're talking about the rise and fall of civilizations. Gold was used to buy houses back in ancient Rome. It's still around. It's an asset that will forever have its value. So, folks, if you want to do this and you need someone that you can trust, there's no person I can recommend more than Dr. Kirk Elliott. He's a very good friend of mine. He's a strong Christian patriot, and he's out to really help people to protect their savings and what you've worked for against the destruction of the dollar, not to mention also protecting it against the dangers of central bank digital currencies. So, to learn more about this, go to goldwithseth.com or call 720-605-3900. Again, that's goldwithseth.com or 720-605-3900. Both those places will allow you to set up a quick appointment where you can talk to a wealth advisor that will help get you started on this path. Again, goldwithseth.com, 720-605-3900. Mr. JJ Carrell, it is an honor to have you back on the show. Thank you so much for being here with us.
I'd come back anytime. You just tell me when. I love your show, and I love the long format you give me, and the ability just to talk in depth about a subject that is so layered and so complex. I appreciate the time, Seth.
Absolutely, absolutely. So you're an ex-border agent. If I remember correctly, it was 2.5 decades or so that you spent on the border yourself, running teams, intimately involved with that entire operation. So, I've had you on before talking extensively about what we're seeing, specifically with the special interest, aliens, the military age men, et cetera, coming across the border. And we've known all along, and you've pointed out, a lot of the criminality is coming from within our own government, and it's allowing of this keeping the borders open. But I saw a recent clip with you on Redacted, which is a great show, by the way, with Clayton and Natalie Morris. And you were detailing, I know that you're doing a documentary right now, and you were talking about what this whistleblower had told you from within the DHS about the funding. And this was mind blowing to me. As soon as I saw this, is like within the last 24 hours, I saw that clip. I got a hold of you immediately. Said, look, we got to get you on the show because, and we're talking hundreds of millions, hundreds of billions, even it seems that is being poured into this from our own taxpayer money. So I'll go ahead and hand it to you though, just to explain a little bit about what you experienced from this particular whistleblower or any other whistleblowers in the process of your documentary.
Okay. First, let me just tell your audience, the partnership between the NGOs and the federal government is like a crime. It's like mob bosses coming together and colluding. That's what it's like. But here's also something I want your audience to understand, that this DHS individual, and he's not a whistleblower. I know that we talk about whistleblower. I can't get anybody to talk to me on camera because everyone's scared to death of the government. Think of that. They won't talk to me because they know the government is going to destroy them. So I have to cover their face, digitize their voice. But he said to me, JJ, the federal government doesn't run the NGOs run the federal government. They tell the federal government how much they're going to pay us, where they're going to take the people, and what they're going to do. And the federal government just says, okay. So this, we call him a whistleblower, this gentleman from DHS, he was the check cutter. He wrote the checks, okay? So this is a guy that's not 10 times removed from, or he just came across some piece of paper and he's like, oh my God, look at this. This guy was in the belly of the beast in DC, in DHS, writing the checks to the NGOs. So I said to him, okay, tell me, let's walk through this NGO thing. And you have to kind of walk through it to understand it because it's complex and it's layered and it's criminal. So criminals, organized crime, I should say, doesn't just do things willy-nilly. Like it gets layered and they wall stuff off. So I said, okay, walk me through this. He goes, okay, you have Lutheran Family Services, Catholic Charities, and a couple other big ones, but let me just focus on Jewish Family Services. I said, okay, tell me what's the largest check you wrote? Well, the largest check I wrote was $600 million. And I was like, okay, hold on. I just had to say, okay, hold on. For what? For 2 to 3 years? And he goes, no, for about 2 or 3 months. And I was like, okay, hold on a second. And he goes, no, JG, it's worse than that. I said, it's okay. It's worse than that. I said, okay, hold on. I need to get clarification. Are you cutting a check for 600 million to Jewish Family Services, and then that negates Catholic Charities and United Way? He goes, no. People in the DHS are cutting checks at the same time for the same amount to Catholic Charities. And I said, okay, you said it gets worse. Then tell me what it gets worse. How does this get worse? He said, because under Jewish Family Services or under Catholic Charities, but just in particular Jewish Family Services, there are 10s, 50, 100 subcontractors underneath Jewish Family Services. And he said, you have to understand the federal government created this boondoggle, this invasion with no real thought of how I'm going to move millions of people from point A to point B. So there came the NGOs. So he says, we are in a frantic emergency position, meaning when you see FEMA go into emergency, they're not counting the nickels, right? They're just throwing money. Okay. Same thing on the border. They're just throwing money. So my source says to me, so after Jewish Family Services gets $600 million, the subcontractors like hyenas come in for their scraps. And it's like 5 million for diapers, another 5 million for food. Hey, we need COVID tests because you know how much COVID tests cost to get analyzed, Seth? $2,000 a test. Let me say that again, Seth. Those free COVID tests that you stick up your nostril or swab yourself and you test it yourself, well, illegal aliens need doctors and nurses, and they charge $2,000 per COVID test. And it gets better. Every time they move them, Seth, they have to retest them, right? They have to know what they are. So millions, hundreds of millions of dollars for COVID tests. I digress. So they say, the hyenas come out and they say, I'm subcontractor X. I need $5 million for diapers. And I said, okay, do you call Jewish Family Services and say, kick money down? He's like, no, it's frantic. We're frantic. I just cut a check for $5 million for diapers. And he says, this is where the criminal activity even goes further. He says, I will cut that check to subcontractor X. But do you know where the electronic funds transfer goes to? It's like, no. Well, it goes to Jewish Family Services account. I said, wait a minute. You just gave them $600 million, but you're giving money to the subcontractors. That's like I have a general. I pay the general to build my house, and my subcontractor, and I make a change, and I have to pay the subcontractor, right? I pay the subcontractor. Or I pay the general, and the general flows the money down. No, it's just a free grab at money. So Jewish Family Services gets 600 million, but then it launders money through their subcontractors back to their same account. This is criminal, Seth. When this is all said and done, I need your audience to understand. Per government data, they are saying on the low end, after Joe Biden's 4 years, he will have spent somewhere around 700 billion with a B. The real number is over $1 trillion. We just spent $1 trillion on illegal aliens. It's shocking. And when you dive, and this is the thing, and I'll finish with this, and you asked me more on the NGOs, but I need everyone to understand this. I'm a guy with 24 years in the Border Patrol. My last year was Joe Biden's first year in his office. I dealt with those NGOs. I dealt with all of it. And back then, it was chaotic, meaning the NGOs bringing the people up from the Darien Gap to the border with all the caravans was clunky. It was unorganized. Getting them across the border and process it was clunky. Having the NGOs come to the station, get the bodies, nothing moved smooth. Now today, it is the most well-oiled, well-run industrial machine I have ever seen in my life. From the Darien Gap all the way to Chicago, New York, and Boston, and everywhere else in between. They have built an assembly line, a conveyor belt that is so impressive. It is so big that even me, the guy that was down there in the belly of the beast, I go back to the border and I go to Chicago and I see these transit hubs, if you will, and I am jarred because I can't believe how big and smooth and well managed and funded this machine is. It blows your mind. Again, I'm rarely surprised. I'm rarely shocked. I was shocked and still to this day can't really grab the enormity of what is happening to our country.
There's a saying that I heard at some point, and I always thought it was such a good saying. And it said, "A blind man groping an elephant," and talking a blind man feeling it, and he feels a leg, and he's like, "Oh, it's a tree," and he feels the trunk, and you think it's something else. But if you take a step back, you realize it's an actual big elephant, but he can only see one part of it. And so with this, I think this to me pieces together one part of it, right? That, okay, we know the borders being used to bring in a fifth column for our enemy states into our country, whether it's Chinese soldiers, UN soldiers, Russian soldiers, terrorists from Middle East, etc. We know that the government is involved in massive human trafficking, drug trafficking, arms trafficking across the border. We know these things. Now, with this and saying that the funding of this, we're talking over $1 trillion going into this. To me, these are the different parts of the elephant. In your mind, though, what is the bigger picture? What does the whole thing look like? What's the big elephant look like sitting there? What is at the highest level you can imagine, what's happening right now? Because this is insane. And any small slice of it you look at is absolutely insane. It makes no sense if you care about the future of our country. Yet when you put all those pieces together, it's a much scarier picture than any one of them on their own. What do you think that picture is?
I think that picture is the fundamental transformation or destruction of the United States of America. I do not say that lightly. I'm not trying to get clicks and not trying to improve my social status in social media. I'm just telling you what the hell's going on. Listen, I had theories based on real facts and research and experience, but I love to means test what I believe. I am telling you without hesitation that everything that we are witnessing is intentional, purposeful, and has been strategically planned. Therefore, I'm flying home from Chicago last Sunday after 3 days of just filming. And I'm flying home and I'm thinking about everything that I experienced. I start thinking about my beliefs and I start thinking about how did this get to this point? How did we get this big? How did it get to the point where it is a military operation, a machine that is destroying America? And all I could come to, Seth, was there had to have been the highest level in our government sitting around a round table and planning this out. There is no other explanation, meaning the president, who we know that doesn't know what planet he's on, but his cabinet under Mayorkas, Susan Rice, etc., they had to have planned it. This doesn't happen by happenstance. And you say, well, give me something to hold on to. I can do all day. April 2022, Mayorkas flies down to the Darien Gap in Panama. Michael Yon, investigative reporter, happens to be there with a drone. He flew in there on the Blackhawks. He catches Mayorkas in there talking about building migrant transit centers. He goes down there and builds migrant transit centers to help think of way stations for illegal aliens to come in, get medicated food, clothes, shelter, and then continue on their journey. He has built regional processing centers in foreign nations. He has removed and destroyed the border. He has Border Patrol agents doing other than Border Patrol duties. And I can go on and on and on. There had CBP One app where you get your iPhone and you say, I want to get amnesty and asylum. Okay, come to this port of entry and we'll let you walk in. That's unconstitutional. They had to make a conscious decision, Seth. You cannot release, under immigration law, you cannot release an illegal alien into America. So there had to be a conscious decision to say, we're going to create this alternative to detention where I put an ankle bracelet on them, and therefore I say that individual's detained. But that individual goes on and rapes young kids across America, kills and murders and rapes people like Lincoln Riley all across America by the thousands because he's still detained. Do you see that there had to have been the highest level in our government in coordination with religious groups and corporations to strategically plan the destruction of America? And that's where I believe we're at. I think we are at the final stages. You are seeing the rush to the border now, where illegal aliens are saying, they're asking, what's the franticness? You're going to get in. No, we're afraid Trump's going to win, and then it's going to close it down. Think about what the people that are coming here are saying. We are seeing the complete replacement of the United States of America. Seth, right now, nobody argues. Nobody on the left, the crazy media, no one argues the fact that there are 45 million illegal aliens in the United States of America. And people like myself believe the number will eclipse 50 million by the end of his term. 50 million, Seth, that's 1 in 6 people living in America is an illegal alien, with the vast majority single adult military age men. I just came from Chicago, Seth. The day after I left, a video comes out of these savages from Venezuela are having a knife and machete fight in the same street that I was standing on and filming. This is coming. This is in America. You are seeing, you asked me what the big picture is. The big picture is you cannot globally reset without America falling. You can't. Sweden's about to fall. The Netherlands are about to fall. You see that very attractive woman, I forget her name, I apologize, that is talking about the demographic shifts in Belgium, Netherlands, and Sweden. If those nations fall, it's going to be terrible. But does anybody really care economically, world power-wise? No. America falls, the world changes overnight. And that is what is going on. I know it's hard to, I know I sound crazy. I know. I understand it. When I'm having interviews with people like you, or I'm giving a speech at a Republican GOP conference or whatever, I have an inner voice. I'm not just blurting this out. I have an inner voice that's saying, okay, you have to say this part out loud, JJ. I know no one's going to believe you and they're going to say you're crazy. But I have to say it because it's true. I'm padding my book, my invaded book. As I'm writing that book, my final edit is less than a year ago. I am in the middle of the night writing my book, and there are times, Seth, where I pause, I say a quick prayer to God that I'm not wasting my time writing this book. And then the second thought is, nobody is going to believe what I'm writing. They are going to call me vile names, and they're going to say I'm crazy. Everything I wrote and everything I predicted has already surpassed my predictions. We are beyond even what I wrote about a year ago. Seth, you've had me on your show, very appreciative, multiple times. The last time I spoke to you is about 4 or 5 months ago. The whole landscape has changed. It's frightening when you understand the enormity of the people and the machine. It will keep you up at night. I promise you.
Well, I have to say that I talk to a lot of people just, on the show and in regular life. And to me, you're one of the most sane people. I find that most people don't want to talk about these things. It's like someone has a cancerous tumor hanging off the side of their neck and they don't even want to acknowledge it. That's a lot of people that I've talked to. Less so as guests on the show, because I tend to find people that I think want to figure out what's really going on. But so many people, like they're walking around with this big growth on their neck that they're just ignoring. Mm-hmm. And they're pretending that it's never gonna affect them. They're gonna live their life. Life will be great. It's the new normal. But that thing's eating away at them. And if they don't do something about it, it's gonna take their life in 2 or 3 years. And like, I want to talk to the people that are saying like, hey man, you've got a big thing on your neck. Let's deal with it right now before it gets to be too big. And that's why I enjoy speaking with you. So you mentioned Well, you mentioned Chicago, which I want to dig into Chicago and learn about what you're seeing there, but also understand how the landscape has changed, as you mentioned. And now I know that you were in Chicago, and that relates to the documentary that you're working on. So, do you want to explain or give a plug to the documentary? Is there a website I can pull up to help gear people towards looking forward to when it's coming out, or is it too early for that? What do you
No,
say?
we have a website. Our documentary is called What is Treason? But our website is This is Treason. Thisistreason.com. We have a Give, Send, Go, which I hate plugging that, but the costs are exorbitant because as Seth, as I'm talking about this and going on Chicago, and we call it legs, more legs of this tour, and it's going to come up. I'm sorry, it's going to be up tomorrow. I apologize. The this is treason.com will show up tomorrow and be fully functional. But more people want to be a part of it. They're calling me, people that very high level people saying, I have information, I'll speak to you. So I got to fly to Chicago, I got to fly to Colorado and Florida, and it just adds up, as you can imagine. So we have a Give, Send, Go / Save in America to help, because this is all self-funded. Because the reason why it's self-funded is consciously. I've been approached throughout my career and then after I retired where people wanted to do a documentary, but we're not aligned, and I'm not going to make a soft puff piece. So when my business partner, Ryan Matta, decided that, hey, he came to me and said, we're going to do this. I want to do this documentary with you. I said, we're going to have to find either a one donor or we're going to have to self-fund, because I want total control, not as a maniac, but as somebody that wants to control what I'm going to say. My name's on it. My face is there. I don't want anybody saying that's a puff piece or that's ridiculous. I want it to be very focused, because when you look at the enormity of this, Seth, it's like the best way I can describe it is like a mutant octopus with 8 arms, but it has 100 arms, 100 tentacles, and they're reaching out across America. So that's what we're doing. We're self-funding. It is getting bigger and bigger. It's bigger than even I could have actually dreamed or thought, okay, I'm going to have a voice and I'm going to have a megaphone, but maybe I really just going to have like a little karaoke microphone. But now it's as if I've never seen anything like this, because again, and there may be the reason why, is I'm a strong believer in the truth has a ring to it and people are drawn to the truth. Martin Luther King, George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, all the men that talk truth and honor, people want to hear it because they're drawn to it. So we can talk about anything you want. Chicago is the reason why I went straight from the border to Chicago is ground zero for the manifestation of this treason. New York is bigger, has more illegals, has more problems. Boston the same way, Denver, on and on. But Chicago is a powder keg ready to explode.
So, before you start describing why it is that, by saying that Chicago is ground zero, or what you saying is that that's the hub, that's kind of where the main stage of this invasion is really setting itself up. I mean, walk us through this, because I've been to
Okay.
Chicago a bunch. I used to live in Ohio. It was a 6-hour drive for us to go. Easy, fun trip. Go to the Sears Tower. It was always nice. I always loved Chicago. I've been there a long time. But I mean, geographically, I can see it. It's pretty central, to the overall country. But why is Chicago so special, and what's happening in Chicago?
Okay, so before I went to Chicago, I just had a gut feeling from all my research and data and calling friends and saying, tell me, I think Chicago is ground zero. And let me maybe clarify what ground zero is to me. Ground zero is not the centralized thinking of a Amazon Prime distribution center. I just see the combustible forces coming together in Chicago, and they're going to ignite and explode. When I went to Chicago for 3 days, I just did interviews and filming 3 days straight. I went into the south side of Chicago. I had to be escorted by a convicted felon that has been out of jail for murder for 21 years.
Folks, I have a quick message for you. Look, the 2024 election is do or die for the globalists and communists that have infiltrated our country and are currently running it. And they either have to win or they're going to destroy America so nothing is left either way. And if you're the person that's watching this show and following this information, unfortunately, you have the weight on your shoulders of making sure that your family is prepared, especially as we head into this next year and this next election cycle, because unfortunately, I think it's going to get rough. And one of the ways I know they're going to target us is through our food supply. You can see all the food factories burned down. You can see the warnings of coming famines and food shortages and everything like that. And food is one of the number one ways totalitarian regimes have always used to control the population, is destroy the food supply. So if you don't have at least 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 months worth of stored food, I highly recommend you take that very seriously because, look, as I mentioned, if you're the person that's watching this, you're the person that carries the burden of making sure your family is prepared. I would recommend at least 6 months, if not a year, of storable food. So if things go haywire, whether it's grid down or terrorist attack from what's coming across the border, that your family can safely stay in place and you can feed your family. So folks, today, go to heavensharvest.com and make sure you get your storable food that'll last for up to 25 years. Just in case things go south, you know that you have what's going to take to feed your family, which is so, so critical for us to get through this next stage of history. So go to heavensharvest.com today, order your food that'll last up to 25 years, and use promo code Seth to save 15% on your entire order. Again, that's heavensharvest.com and use promo code Seth, S-E-T-H, to save 15% on your entire order.
I met the founder of the Black Disciples that runs Inglewood. I talked to soup kitchen chefs. I talked to street pastors, everyone in between, mega church pastors that are building multi-million-dollar facilities for their community. I talked to politicians in the GOP, precinct leaders, white businessmen outside of South of Chicago. But all of the Black Americans, Black residents living in Chicago, they all told me and validated everything that I believed. And they said, and I'm going to quote, "We are at war." And I said, okay, I need you to clarify war, because war to me is death and destruction and pain. And they said, yes, we are going to war against, and they make it very clear, the Venezuelans. Illegal aliens are pouring into Chicago by the tens of thousands, probably 1,000 every day. The vast majority are single adult military age men from Venezuela. They have a vicious gang called Tren de Aragua, and they have another gang, prison gang, because all their prisons got emptied into America. And for whatever reason, and I interviewed a multitude of Venezuelans, and I said, why did you choose Chicago? And they said, well, because when we crossed the borders, Catholic Charities told us you go to either New York City or Chicago. So we chose Chicago. They are funneling Venezuelans. I asked the Black residents, from women to violent gang members and reformed convicts, I said, what is happening that makes you feel that you need to war? You go to war. And they told me, they said, and not my words, I just left everything open. They said, we are being replaced. I said, okay. I said, I agree with that, but tell me, give me a specific. Before I tell you the specific, I want you to understand that there are two Americas. There is the America that we live in, Seth, and then that's their America. Third world, inner city Chicago, roads are torn up, buildings are shuttered, housing, townhome, if you want to call them a house, maybe it's called a house, are shuttered. The ones that are living in are dilapidated. It is a place of desolation, hopelessness, and despair, with violent crime as the backdrop. And I said, well, give me an example of your replacement. Okay. City of Chicago just paid us $1,000 to leave our rent, leave our apartment. He says we left because it's so dilapidated they won't fix anything. The landlords won't fix anything. So I took the money and now we're moving out trying to find another place. And I said, okay, is that going, like, is that citywide in Inglewood? Yes. And he said, I said, okay, well, what are they doing? They tearing down the buildings? No, they're allowing the Venezuelans to live in there because the rent, a Venezuelan has a $9,000 voucher from the city for rent. $9,000, Seth. So they're moving the blacks out of their community and moving Venezuelans. I had Pastor Brooks. I don't know if you ever heard of Pastor Brooks. He's the AKA the rooftop pastor that Tucker Carlson, he went up and lived on a roof for like 120 days during the winter of Chicago because on this building, it was abandoned, had prostitution, rapes, drug dealing right across from his church and his community center. And he's telling me, he said, listen, you are one Venezuelan away from raping a young black girl in the inner city, where you're one black gang member killing a Venezuelan gang member. And he said, this whole city is going to explode. Explode. I went to further, and I'm rarely shocked, but I had a conversation with a precinct leader in the GOP, and her specialty is education. And she's rattling off numbers like this to me. And she says to me, do you understand, JJ, that there are 330-ish thousand students in Chicago Teachers Union in the school district? And she said 48% of them are illegal aliens. I said, 48%? Yes. And I said, well, and she goes, and do you know that Chicago's teacher union was down in Venezuela in 2016 and 2019, setting up the avenues for illegal aliens to come into Chicago? You're looking at Chicago is being decimated. The black Americans in Chicago are saying to me, our children are going to schools with illegal aliens. English is a second language by multitude of languages. Their reading proficiency is 13%. Their math proficiency is 7%, meaning 93% of their students cannot read or write or do math. So when I say, okay, that's a replacement. And then she says to me, JJ, the black population in Chicago and the inner cities has decreased to about 700-ish thousand people, and it's dropping daily. She says, is this a coincidence that two weeks ago, our Mayor Johnson said, and I quote, we have room to take in 700,000 illegal aliens. And she said, do you think that's just a coincidence? Or do you think they're replacing us? And she sounded like me, Seth. She said, after everything that I told you, all the data points that are real, do you, JJ, think that this is just happenstance? And she's not. This is planned out. And I'm telling you, Seth, as the gang members told me, they said, we're going to war. Do you know how much weapons we have? Do you know that we have 100-round drums for our machine guns or M4s? Do you know that we have 30, 40-round magazines that go in our handguns? You think we're going to lay down? And here is the last thing I want to say to drive this point home. You have black men and women, but particularly black men in Chicago, that feel disrespected, humiliated, oppressed. They feel forgotten, and they're resentful. But I named one thing in that list that on top of everything else that they're going through, they all said, I feel humiliated. They are humiliating us. You were talking about a group of people in Chicago for decades that have been in a war state, a survival, murder, capital. Do you think that that's not going to play a part in the Democratic Party destroying the black community with illegal aliens? And you say, well, that's far-fetched. Oh, really? You think it is? I was there. I talked to these people. Nobody has access to them. I had to go through one, two, three people to get me to Cairo Mohammed and the Don to get me passage into the inner city, to get to sit down in a round table and talk to these people. Chicago is going to burn. And they told me it is going to happen. And then I have to, one more point. The Democratic Party knows this, Seth. They know it as well as I do, or probably more. And that is why this week, the Democratic Party said, well, we might not have the Democratic convention in Chicago. We might do it remotely. Remotely. Do you know where they're having the convention? They're having it on the west side of Chicago, inside the hood, the same as the south side. What in God's name were they thinking? I spoke to a lieutenant in the police department, Chicago PD, and he said to me, and I quote, "We are unprepared for everything that's going to happen when the DNC comes." And I'll further this and paraphrase. Our federal partners are so concerned for us because we are not ready. It is the bomb has been built. The wick is out. Who is going to light it? Who's going to light that fuse? Is it going to be a murder? And you say, well, JJ, give me some kind of context. Well, the day after I left Chicago, Seth, the exact same street that I'm filming on in Chicago, 8, 10 Venezuelan illegals are having a huge knife/machete fight in the street. And overlooking them, Seth, 100 yards away, right here, you're showing it. This is what's happening in America. In America, we have violent crime that you can't imagine. Do we have this, Seth? Do we have people with machetes trying to hack each other in the street? This is Chicago. They do that to one of those black gang members and they cut him. Those black gang members are going to come out in droves. They are going to align with each other. And those black men in that city are going to destroy everything in its wake. And you know what? I don't condone violence, but when a man is pushed all the way to the back and you take their home and you destroy their family and you leave them in squalor, what do you think is going to happen? Let's put it this way. Why do they feel humiliated? Chicago has already spent $3 billion, that's with a B, on illegal aliens. Let's go further. Let's bring it right down to the grassroots, dirty secret. As you come off the exit into South Chicago, into Chicago, you will see giant, like a tent facility of small camping tents lining hundreds of U.S. citizens living in utter squalor. Like I came in with a suit and walked because I had to do an interview, and I walked through that with Mark Carter, a street activist. The stench of rotting feces and urine was so powerful, it permeated through my clothes. These poor Americans, drug addicts, mental illness off the chart. Why do I say this? Because, Seth, 200 yards away, Seth, are 4 beautiful, bright white tents that are enormous, like wedding tents, with beautiful signage about free clothes and food and medicine. And this is the transit area for illegal aliens coming into Chicago. It gets better. Once they get processed with new clothes and food and medicine, and they get their little chit where they're going to live, well, they can't be uncomfortable, Seth. So we have 5 city buses sitting on the curb, idling 24 hours a day so that they can come on there, they don't get cold or get too hot in the summer. And I asked one of the guys, I said, he started bemoaning the fact that he feels left out and he's righteous. And he says to me, Seth, and I got to tell this story because it's powerful. He says, during the winter, it's so cold. If you're from Ohio, you know, it's like you leave your house, you're bundled up. I was in South Dakota for a while. It's 5 below zero and the wind's whipping. You maybe run out to your car, or if you go grocery shopping, in your brain, you're like, I'm freezing. I can't wait to get home. Now imagine living in a tent with holes everywhere. You're living on the ground. On the ground, there's no cushion. You are freezing. As he said, my friends had frostbite on their fingers and toes. And he said, then we walked down to the buses and we could see people sitting in them and eating their food, and they were warm. And we are knocking on the door. Please let us in. And the bus driver yelled through the door, didn't even open it. This is for migrants only.
Folks, at the very heart of our democracy lies a principle we hold sacred: free speech. It's the cornerstone that supports every freedom we cherish. Yet, in today's digital age, discussions about our wealth, our rights, and our future are being silenced or overshadowed in mainstream narratives, leaving many feeling voiceless in conversations crucial to our financial independence and security. This is where wealth protection research steps in, armed with a mission that's never been more critical. Wealth Protection Research is not a financial advisory firm. They're defenders of free speech committed to giving a voice to the silenced. Wealth Protection Research tirelessly seeks out financial experts. These are the voices that challenge prevailing narratives, especially as we navigate the uncertainties of the 2024 election. Wealth Protection Research has created a 2024 Election Wealth Protection Report. This free report highlights the 3 best ideas for protecting and growing your money heading into the 2024 election. It contains ideas the mainstream media won't even touch, and listeners can get it completely free. So text IDEAS to 76626 to claim your free copy. If you believe in the sanctity of free speech and the importance of financial freedom, then act now. So text IDEAS to 76626 to claim your free copy of this 2024 Election Protection Report. It's time to widen the scope of what we're told, to hear the ideas the establishment does not think you can handle, and to take control of our financial destinies. So folks, today, text IDEAS to 76626 to claim your free copy.
American citizens were freezing to death. They didn't have a new meal. They haven't eaten all day. You and I can have a discussion, Seth, about how much money should go to homeless. What's the mechanism? What works? What doesn't? Yes, that's a fair argument. What you can't argue with me is that I'm going to allow my brothers and sisters to rot and die on the streets when you have millions of dollars poured in for illegal aliens to stay warm and feeding them and clothing them and medicating them, while our brothers and sisters are struggling, not struggling, they're freezing to death. The summers are coming in Chicago, 100, 110, 115, with the permeating of the heat off the asphalt. But the illegal aliens are going to be in cooling buses. They're going to be fed 3 meals a day. Does anyone in the audience, does anyone in America have a problem with this? And then if you do, you need to understand, you need to times millions of incidents and situations that are happening daily in America. It's a moral sin on our nation, what is happening. There's no other way to talk about it. And we haven't even discussed the child sex trafficking through the NGOs, or the drug deaths that are tripled under Joe Biden, or the devaluing of our money. Did our federal government, Seth, cut $1 trillion out of the budget? No, they printed $1 trillion to pay for illegal aliens. And then you wonder why your grocery bill is so high. You wonder why it costs X amount more dollars to fill your tank and gas. So don't come to me that, well, that's just Chicago. I was just on a call with one of the activists, and he said, make sure your audience understands, once it gets out of Chicago, it's across America. And I said, dude, it's already across America. It just hasn't come out yet. They're there. But it's a terrible time. I love my country. I despise our government.
So when you say that Chicago is a powder keg, I feel like I understand a lot better now. We know that the government's intentionally taken, not as a government, Hollywood, the music industry, the big tech, the media. Of course, they're all fingers in the same hand, and they've taken certain areas and certain demographics and certain people in our country, and they've pushed them to that very edge, and they've filled them up with ideas of violence. They've encouraged violence. You look at the amount of shootings in Chicago every single week and how many are being killed, shot, injured, etc. How many children. So what I'm seeing that this is, and I've been trying to really war game the scenarios leading up to the election. And you can see that I feel like they're really planting the seeds of civil war. And I think our last show was specifically talking about civil war. But I think that Americans won't go into a civil war. Too many of us, I think, now recognize what that flag behind you stands for. Too many of us see how desperate the situation is in our country, and we won't go against our neighbor, even if their political views are different. And I think that they know that, because I think that there has been a mass awakening of the American people, and a lot of people are coming together. You look at the polling numbers, et cetera, it shows there's a big shift happening. But I think this is their plan, though. They don't need Americans to fight Americans. They need to take
Absolutely right.
the most on the edge demographic, on the edge of complete violence and complete societal breakdown and chaos, which I'd say in many ways is inner city Chicago, if you're looking at it. I've lived in New York City. I've lived in various parts of New York City. I've been to some of the bad parts of New York City. It's nothing like what you're describing. And you look at the numbers of crimes and shootings, and you can see, okay, yeah, you're right. It's nothing like that. Mm-hmm. So what they've done, though, is they've taken this particular subset of people in this country, and they've taken these people out of Venezuela. They've emptied their prisons, emptied the prisons with criminals. And these aren't white collar criminals. These are mass murderers. These are people that are they were hitmen for cartels, that were raping and killing these kinds of people, and they're putting them into the most volatile situations. I now look, when you said Chicago was a powder keg, I didn't understand it. But of course, I asked you to explain. I now get it, though. Because what I see they're doing is that they want that to go off, because if they can get X neighborhood in Chicago to erupt with violence, it's just going to spread like wildfire, and it's going to go beyond the walls of Chicago. It's going to go into New York City, California cities. It's going to go to every major city across America, because you of course are going to then create the two sides of it. They're going to have the videos of what's happening. They're going to catch a cop doing something, and there's going to be the resistance to the cops. And I can see it. So they're not reliant. They're not trying to create a civil war of Americans between Americans. They're trying to create a war between violent, criminal, illegal aliens and the violent criminal subsets in America. Not that the entire inner city of Chicago is criminal. It's not.
Correct.
But you've probably got a larger portion of criminals and people that have gone to done time for murder, gone time for attempted murder, armed robbery, et cetera. You probably have a lot higher of a statistic in those regions, and they're setting it up. I mean, this is. I feel like that what you're laying out right now is the playbook, and that's the elephant. I think that's the elephant. Of course, it's the extra votes, come the presidential election. Of course, it's the massive growth of the welfare state, which they're following the playbook of Rome and how Rome collapsed. But looking at this being the powder keg, because that's what they need. They need to create some sort of massive disruption come November 2024. They need the country to be in chaos. So we can't have a normal election. So we can't have someone come in that's not going to perpetuate these exact same policies that have done this to our country. And JJ, Wayne, what the information you're laying out right now, man, this is, I hate to say it, but this looks like this is it.
When I'm flying home, or when Ryan and I, my business partner in this venture, when we were leaving, we didn't stay in Southside at night, right? We did our filming and interviews, and we'd go home to a suburb in Chicago. And there were every night that we drove back, we kind of were like driving in silence for a while. And then we'd look at each other and we would say, what the hell did we just see? What did all those people just tell us? I did this for 24 years as a Border Patrol agent and as a task force operator, interviewing criminals, interviewing men, deciphering who's full of crap, who's telling the truth, look in their eyes, understand where they're coming from, their propensity to violence, what they have been through already. I'm telling you, I sat with men that when they tell me I'm going to go to war, I'm going to do everything I have to, I believe them, Seth. There was not a moment where I was like, nah, this guy's full of crap. It was like, yep, I believe you. Let me give you an example of why I know. I went there. We went down. To try to articulate this is think of downtown Chicago. Downtown Chicago is beautiful, right? It's beautiful. One of the buildings called the Standard Club, it's like 12, 15 stories high, beautiful concrete on the outside. They renovated the whole damn thing to hold up to 1,200 single adult military age men. I just described to you the squalor U.S. citizens are living in. They retrofitted that building to house all the illegal aliens, almost all of them Venezuelans. I walked down there with the guy that Mark Carter, street activist, highly intelligent, articulate man that knows inside and out of Chicago politics. And I'm standing around and I'm looking at 200-300 Venezuelan men congregating, taking over the whole city block. I see those men wearing very nice clothes, being fed 3 meals a day. They have cars, Seth, cars with no license plates. They have no license. Chicago PD tells me they can't stop them. They just let them go wild. And I'm telling you this because the guy that taken me there is a black man from the South Side. And he gets into an argument. We literally walk in behind 2 illegal alien Venezuelans into a building that houses them. I walk in, metal detectors, Seth, metal detectors. And then immediately the people run and jump up, get out of here. You can't be here. And I'm calm. And I just say, wait a minute. What is this place? It's a lobby. I'm not allowed to walk into the lobby of a building. No, get out. They call the police. I'm looking at this black man, and I've seen this throughout my life in law enforcement. He was enraged. His eyes glazed over, and he was in this I'm going to kill mode. I've been in that mode myself. I've been there. The rage of fighting people and feeling caged and trapped. And we got him to leave. And I looked at my partner and I said, did you get that on film? Because that face is the face of hundreds of thousands of black men here in Chicago. That is their rage. You could feel the rage, Seth. Feel it. And he looked at me and he said, they get everything. Housing, clothes, cars, food. And they humiliate us. They give us nothing. We have crumbs. I can't feed my family. I can't house them. My kids are killing each other in the streets. And they give all the money to them. No resources for my community. And that's when it struck me. yeah, this is the plan. This is exactly what it is. And I told them, I had a very, look, one thing I am is I'm honest and I'm straight shooter. I'm sitting in this table with these black men, gang members, started, the guy is 70 years old, the founder of the Black Disciples, violent gang, multiple murders. And I tell them, I need you all to understand, you are talking in a future tense, meaning a present and future tense, that you are being replaced. I said, I'm telling you, you are replaced. You are already replaced. You are a group of people no one cares about. Outside of Chicago, you know what we hear when we hear the weekend report of 150 people got shot, 24 got murdered. Nobody cares. Is that right or wrong? I'm not arguing that. I'm telling you, no one cares. And they said, we know. And we know that we're the only ones that are going to take care of our communities. And we're going to do that. And I told them, I said, this is very hard for you to hear, but your enemy outnumbers you. And your enemy has reinforcements coming to Chicago every day to the tune of probably 1,000 a day. Their army is coming. They're here. They're replenishing. And they all just were defiant. I understand, but we are going to war. They kept saying it over and over again. If you think that this is okay, America, that your brothers, look, the politicians and the media want to say that black men hate whites and whites hate blacks and we hate Hispanics and blah, blah, blah. I'm telling you, that is a bold-faced lie. I have been around these people. I've been around criminals. I've been around Border Patrol agents. I've been and we're all different races. But the thing that scares the power structure the most, Seth, is when an alpha male, black alpha male that's been in prison for 21 years for murder is standing side by side with a white guy that's been in law enforcement for 24 years, and we are completely aligned. And we're both pointing our fingers and saying, you, alderman, you congressman and president, you're the enemy. We have identified you as the enemy, and we will not stop until we get our country back. That scares them to death. And what I found, and I find this every time, and it's so refreshing, I interview people like you do, Seth, all walks of life. We share more in common than we have disagreements. And the disagreements we have don't end in shooting each other. It ends in discussion and maybe a disagreement. The lie that the media has told and everyone said is a lie. Black Americans are Americans. White Americans are Americans. When are we going to stand side by side and demand justice for all of us? I don't know, but I know the time is coming. I know it. And you say, well, is there really a war coming? Well, Alex Jones just came out and said the UN is training soldiers, illegal aliens coming into America. Alex Jones is crazy. Oh, really? Was Alex Jones more crazy now, saying that the UN is training illegal alien soldiers, or was he more crazy when he laid out in detail Muslim terrorists are going to take over planes and fly them into World Trade Center by a man that controls it? His name is Osama bin Laden, and the Twin Towers are going to fall. And then they're going to blame it on Muslims, and they're going to create a war. That man predicted it. How do you predict that, Seth? So was he more crazy back then and everything came true? Or is he more crazy now? I think this is way more easy to believe than the World Trade Center's falling down and thousands of Americans dying. Everything that I'm saying to your audience can be Googled, fact-checked, 5 ways to Sunday. It's true. You don't have to like it. You can put your head in the sand and think it's all going to be rainbows and unicorns. But I'm telling you, it's coming to your neighborhoods. It's already here. I can go on for a whole 24 hours and not take a breath and talk about one rape, one child molestation, one murder after another, after another, after another that's happened across America by the hands of illegal aliens to U.S. citizens of all races and all ethnicities. This is happening to America. You are absolutely right. This is the plan, Seth.
It's heavy stuff. It is. It's heavy, but it's real. There's no turning away. I do hope that
No.
I hope that Americans across every race and income class and everything can do exactly what you're talking about, is stand side by side. Because I agree, that's the greatest threat to these people, is us being
Seth,
unified.
yes, I believe that is. I believe it's going to have to happen at the ground level. City council and mayors, e-verify, sanctuary city against sanctuary city laws, right? That type of, you come to our city, we're a sanctuary. We're gonna protect you. No illegals here. No illegals go into our schools and ruin our schools. Look, I understand that there's good people coming across that border looking for a better life. I get that. But that's not our responsibility. If all of our inner cities were gleaming, beautiful places to live and all our streets were good and we had $35 trillion in the black instead of in the red, then that's a different discussion. We're 35 trillion that we know about in the hole. We're bankrupt. Look, you said it, it's heavy. I do not enjoy these conversations, Seth. I always tell people, President Trump won the election. If he would have been that was not have been stolen, we would have a completely secure border. I would be talking to you today, Seth, about the old days and how crazy it was, and the Democrats and Republicans screwed us. But look at what Trump did. We have this under control. We had a secure border, and the border wall wasn't even built yet. Nothing. 70% of everything that he wanted to do wasn't even in place. And yet I'm sitting here and I'm having to talk to you in these terms. Look, I'm very aware of how I sound. I think that I do a lot of introspection and think about what I'm going to say and how I say it. I understand how I sound. I don't like it. I don't take joy in it. But I've told you this before. I got a young son. My son, when he's a man and has children and is married, and I'm 80 years old and I'm going to start to die, my son's not going to look at me and say, Dad, you were in the Border Patrol. You knew everything that was happening. Why did you stay silent, Dad? Well, son, because I didn't want to be called vile names and it's uncomfortable. No. My son's going to look at me and maybe the world changes. It's great. And maybe it just falls apart. But my son's going to look at me and say, Dad, I have great respect for you because people called you horrible names, but you were ahead of your time. You saw it coming when no one else wanted to. That's why I do it. I'm not going to be quiet, Seth. I'm not going to go away. I know I'm going to be canceled. I know the government probably has me on some list. I know that sounds crazy. I can't believe it's coming out of my mouth, but it is. Just like they're tracking you and the people you interview, because we're saying things that are uncomfortable. Your government hates you. Your own government hates the nation it represents. Not my words, Seth, their words. It's not my actions, it's their actions. Just listen. Stay silent for a second and listen to them. And then look at what they've done. And then after that, come back to me and tell me I'm wrong. I'll be waiting, but I know I'm not.
Well, JJ, I feel like we could keep going, which we'll have to do another one of these. I feel like we need to have more often, have these check-ins with each other, especially with what you're doing. The documentary you're working on, I want to bring up the Give, Send, Go one more time. This is, folks that want to get involved, they want to help. This is an information war. The more we can get this kind of information out, this conversation, the more people that can hear this conversation, this is how we change things. The more people that can see this documentary, that's how we change things. We have to get more people to see who the real enemy is. And it's not who they're telling us on CNN. It's not who they're telling us on Fox News. It's much bigger than that. So givesendgo.com/saving America to support the documentary. JJ, when is this documentary coming out? How can we follow what's going on with it?
So we will have the website. Thisistreason.com will come out by the end of the week. It should be up by tomorrow, but just barring some technical issues. Great website, very clean. And what we're going to do is, as we go to each city and state, we are going to put up edited raw footage. So you understand, you go along in this journey with us. And then we will have this completely wrapped up and ready to, we're going to do pre-sales, $9.99. It's not $20 or $30, $9.99. Get you the documentary. It will come out in September. It will be all done in September. And my partner has a great idea, because 90 minutes of a documentary, you get to the point where you're like, I really would love to hear what Seth Holhouse has to say. I only got 2 minutes of him. I want to hear it. Well, for an extra charge of like $5, you have access to hundreds of hours of our interviews and video. So things that you want to, Tyrone Mohammed, he's an ex-con that was in prison for 21 years for murder, is now a leading activist in the community. You want to hear what he has to say. The whole documentary should be him, 90 minutes just talking. But you'll have a way to go listen to the words that he says. I'm very excited about this. I'm very apprehensive at the same time, because I know what's going on, but I know there is a lot that I'm not aware of yet, and I'm going to see it. I haven't even gone and interviewed the child sex trafficking experts. I haven't even gone and interviewed the major narcotic cartel experts. I think that's going to shock me, even me. So please, if you go to GiveSendGo /Saving America, even $5, it adds up. I have 2 new trips. I got to go to Colorado and I got to fly to Florida and interview some very, very important people that want to be in the documentary. So Seth, as always, your time you give me to be able to articulate this fully, I totally appreciate that, because it is so complex. It is so layered that it has to have time to be able to explain what the hell is going on. But it's frightening and it's uneasy, and people don't like to talk about evil because it's evil. And people don't like to talk about people that hate their country because we love our country. So thank you for the time. I will forever be appreciative for it.
Absolutely. I mean, thank you for coming. And before we sign off, I also just want to bring up your Twitter page at JJCarrell14. I'll put these links in the description below, and also your Rumble page. So you've got a phenomenal show with Brian O'Shea, ex-Special Forces, super guy in intelligence, military intelligence, Unrestricted Invasion. It's on Rumble. Also, fantastic show. Part of the Daily Clout Network. So again, JJ Carrell, thank you very much for coming on. I hope that more people are watching and following you and what you're doing. You're doing very important work, and I'm glad that you come on, and your shows always do really well when you come on here, because the message that you're carrying it punches you in the gut, which is what we need. It's what Americans need. We need to be kind of punched in the gut every once in a while and say, hey, life isn't all hunky-dory kumbaya as you want it to be. There's a real threat. We can get back to that, but we got to address the real threat. And I appreciate you for leaning into that and helping us understand what that threat is.
Thank you very much. Look forward to speaking to you soon.
All right. Thanks, JJ. Folks, perhaps you'd agree with me when I say that over the past 5 years, the mainstream healthcare system's credibility has plummeted. Alternative healthcare systems that aren't beholden to medical consensus or big pharma are on the rise. Sweetamine is time-tested and proven to boost your life with better health. It's one of the leading products that helps with inflammation and daily aches and pains. Just because you get older, it doesn't mean you have to feel old. And folks, did you know that most of the diseases that make people sick and die these days are rooted in chronic inflammation? oftentimes due to glycine deficiency. So, sweetamine is composed mainly of the amino acid glycine, the nutrient that the immune system uses to regulate inflammation. So, with once daily sweetamine, most people feel the reduction in pain after just a few days. So, I challenge you to the 12-day sweetamine challenge to fight inflammation and take control of your health today. So, folks, buy sweetamine online at sweetamine.com or call 855-GET-SWEET. That's 855-438-7933. And make sure you use promo code SETH, SETH, to get a nice discount on your purchase.